you don't want to continue a company. There is a lot of walking dead companies that go on for 15, 20 years. And the founders have made no money in this, investors have made no money in this, and maybe they are barely profitable, but there's living and there's no not living in it. You don't want to be in that situation either. So I kind of agree with Neerav, you got to look for opportunities, the market's looking for buyers, and if you find a buyer, just go for it. That's what I would say in my 2 cents worth.
Go
That's
for
the
good
third
stuff.
time you're going to watch it.
Yes, and a question here.
This is for Neeraj. When you're starting a company, do you do the technology based on the acquirer you'll have in the future? If you're not looking for M&A, is that so critical? Because someone told me that's the most important thing most of the companies acquiring look at is what technology you have.
So maybe Tessa, you can talk a little bit on the technology side and that value creation.
Right. You know, I think you sometimes don't always know why somebody wants to buy you. Sometimes it is for your technology, and sometimes, and we've been seeing a lot of this lately, it's just a hiring action because they think that you have put together a very talented group of people. And particularly in this area, it's hard to find talent. It gets soaked up very quickly. So it really does depend. I think that a good way to have your valuation go down is to not have done your homework in terms of your technology. And when we talk about hygiene, what I wanted to describe to you was really what an acquirer is looking for when they're going through the diligence process. I mean, I think it's useful to see it from the other side. So when we're faced with a company that we're supposed to be doing diligence on, there is an unbelievably detailed approach to the diligence process. There's this little thing called a red flag, which is if the acquirer looking through your agreements or looking to see through your IP finds what they call a red flag, meaning something really bad, that means your valuation is going to plummet or the deal could be off. And you could have spent all that time putting together your diligence room and it's not really relevant. So what are they doing? They're looking through all of your agreements to see if you have given away the shop. Have you granted exclusivity, which means that the acquirer can't, develop the business in the way they want to do it? Have you granted rights under your patents, or in your case, maybe you don't have patents, you didn't think about it, but your acquirer has patents, and I want to talk about that more in a minute because it's really important. Have you forgotten to get the appropriate invention disclosure, and now you had to fire that person, and they're going to come back out of the woodwork? There are so many different places that you can kind of screw it up. So the hygiene is doing it right in the first place and thinking about your exit each and every time you enter into an agreement. Making sure that if you are licensing in key technology, that key technology is going to be transferable to the acquirer. What happens if you want to sell your company, your technology is fantastic, and it is based on, say, somebody else's technology, and that agreement says, hey, this is non-transferable. What are you going to do with your technology? It's half of the story. That's where you can have a disaster.
And those, with a large buyer, they're hyper-focused on that IP, right? So then the solution, process becomes an extension of the transaction in a lot of times. So I think what we do is counsel companies spend that little bit of extra at making sure you got decent forms and do the groundwork, lay that foundation, from day one you got your data room, so that it's just smoother for you later as you go along. Yes.
So, my name is Sriram. I'm the founder of a border shopping company, and the interesting thing I've seen in the last year is three other companies in this space were Prerevenue got bought, and often it was right after a round of funding. And so as a founder, it's interesting. So I was never thinking that things are going to be moving so fast in the space. So I'm not sure if then for startups at this stage, does it make sense to engage bankers? Would they even engage with such early stage companies? And what's really the process if the dynamic in the market is different in certain areas?
Sure, it's a great question. We sell companies. I would say most companies that PageMill sells, we have revenues and employees and growing, and I don't know what the median revenue is, but we do sell a lot of companies that have that's more on the IP, that is pre-revenue. We did a deal with Microsoft, was very fantastic transaction, $3 million invested, almost $100 million deal, and it was a company that had its product in trials. That's exceptionally rare. And so we can't make a good business signing up companies and stay afloat as a firm, hiring companies that are pre-revenue, because the odds of success are so low. But the odds are not zero. And so what we often do is get involved very early on, help companies get introduced to the right investors or right acquirers for partnership discussions, and in many cases those turn into early stage exits. So bankers can be helpful. You don't really want to sign up a banker when you're that stage of company, but you do want to be, creating awareness of the value you're creating in the ecosystem as early as you can.
And just to piggyback on that, a funding event is actually a PR event. Right?
Great time,
Your
yeah.
visibility. And that might just excite somebody to say, okay, I want this company.
So dilutes you right away. Dilutes your ownership.
Yes, over here.
Pre-revenue companies, the valuation, is that based on possibly number of engineers and the estimated value to the market? I've heard of like a number of like 1 million to 1.2 million per top tier engineers. And then second thing, the value of the IP, do you have to have patents pending, patents issued to actually have value? Or are there other areas of IP that are looked at?
So why don't you take the first part, and Tessa, you can take the second.
Perfect. Every time there's a pre-revenue transaction, it's a negotiated outcome. You can make up all the multiples you want per unique, per ping, per port. It's absolutely almost a black art. And in those cases, it's more functional. Is someone willing to accept an early exit and be valued on black art and negotiation without mark? And if you can get an early exit and make $50 million on 3 invested, that's fantastic. You should take that every day. It's very, very rare. I would say that you should not build your business planning for an early exit, and because it's very, very hard. It is rare. You do see it in the news, which is why people think they can exit early. But on the whole, if people plan their business that way, there'll be a lot more failures.
So be opportunistic.
On the patent side, it definitely helps to have the patents. I mean, essentially, why are you something they can't do on their own? In other words, a patent is essentially a monopoly, right? So if you have a patent on something that reads on the business that folks are moving into, that is an attraction. And I think that one thing that founders can think about is that sometimes it's worth, it feels very expensive to patent, so people are hesitant to do it. But it is the one thing that we counsel folks, spend your money on it if you have a really great idea, because it is very difficult to protect a trade secret, and the patents are worthwhile. I have seen transactions where there's literally a multiple associated with patents. There are 100 patents and we're going to pay X per patent, and that's the black magic in that scenario.
And it's based on the value in that space of the average patent that was sold.
Right. There might be an analysis of what patents are worth or what the licensing is for that. And again, it might be, I'm working on a transaction right now where we were going to buy all the patents and they seemed very important, and in the middle of the transaction it was decided we don't care about their patents. We looked at them and they aren't that important to where we're going, and now we just want the people. So you just never know.
Yes, over here. Oh.
Just to add on one thing, in our business on the M&A side, the role of patents in setting valuation, I would say, is 2 to 3 times more important today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. The amount of litigation you see among all the who's who is astronomical, and there is absolutely a gold rush for patents today. And so if you have really good ideas and you're in it for the long haul, it's absolutely worth investing in.
Yeah, that trend line is not turning south, and so to have those assets, you really need to have the armor, especially, it varies by industry sector, but making that kind of investment can be absolutely key. Yes, right here.
So how much of this passion versus practicality philosophy going to, especially from the founder's perspective, when they don't want to sell, and let's just say you are the first mover advantage with your technology and you have a behemoth of a company that's your competition, much 100 times larger, and they want to kill you as a competition, and that's one of the reasons that could be acquired, not to just synergize their existing product lines, right? So and the founders just don't want to be sold, but the board, how do those dynamics work with the, this is the right time, you don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, might as well get sold. I have a case where my previous company had an offer from a huge company for $800 million, and they turned it down, and 3 years later they got sold for $15 million. So, talk about employees getting pissed off, 3 years later. So,
$100 million, that's absurd, it's going to be worth $1 billion, yeah. Yeah,
I think
how,
as
yeah.
Just to be what I said earlier, the right time to sell is when you have an offer, right? Every offer needs to be treated very, very seriously. And yeah, when you start a company, you're 6 months into it, you have visions of grandeur, but it is hard to generate offers. Getting a deal done requires aligning a lot of stars, right? And these offers don't come around every day.
And this is where the board really earns its value, because the board, not only are they exercising their fiduciary duties as they're bound to for the shareholders' interests, but they're helping and working with the founder team to give counsel on, look, is this bona fide? Is this the best scenario for us to get out now? Is it the right time to get out? Is this the right structure for us? Should it be an acquisition? Should it be a joint venture? Should it be some kind of a strategic licensing deal so that we can get whatever it is, the cash in, and then continue to grow with a key customer or something like that? These are all sort of the permutations, I think, in the board conversation. And I think as counsel, what we try to do is when the outcome of that then comes to the term sheet, then we have a further dialogue. But you guys, I mean, you have to strike that balance, obviously, with yourselves and then with those outside board members.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with you, because most of the venture capitalists, most of the guys on your board have probably a broader view of what's happening in the markets than you yourself do. That's number one. So they'll counsel you well, I think. And in our case, actually, it was interesting. We ended up in a split board situation where some guys wanted to sell and some didn't. So that actually ended up playing well for the employees, because it ended up giving the decision to us as employees. So that was fantastic. But I think to your point about passion versus practicality, it's kind of like other guys have said. You get only a few occasions in your life, and you get this offer. And it depends on several factors, and if you get one, I would go for practicality and move on, and that's really the way I've seen it. Otherwise, you end up in stories like you heard before. I've heard many of these stories.
So Bill, you've counseled boards and founders in this very situation, and you've sat in on those meetings, and as conciliary, you've given your views. What are the things that you hear the most in kind of the dynamic between the founder group and the board group, and how do they most effectively sort through a decision in terms of a response when that offer does come?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the founders here. In particular, it can be a split situation. It can be a situation that's sort of forced upon you, not literally, but there's a high amount of pressure. A lot of times there's only one founder left on the board at that point. And he's struggling with such situations as a really high run rate because of the R&D heads that he has to maintain, and it's outpacing your cash position. The VCs have enough of a quorum internally, inside of the board, to really put really heavy-handed pressure in terms of getting out, because they're not going to put in new money. You try to go out and get a new valuation, with a private placement agent, which I'm sure Christian also does some of in addition to M&A. But if that doesn't happen, there's not a lot of situations, even though if you said, and we went out and surveyed strategic investors, financial investors or otherwise, if the success of the technology, a lot of it depends on spending more money without having enough money coming back over to be profitable. Very little incentive for VCs at that point, at that stage, to put in any more money. So, how do you counsel that particular board is exactly what you said, Chuck, is you got to have different scenarios. What other options do we have realistically at that point? And thus, if an acquisition comes up, which overshadows a joint venture, new partnering agreements, new money in for new partnering arrangements or commercial agreements, which is going to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to really, after design win, to make significant amount of revenue. You're kind of left with, I don't want to be a downer here, but a lot of times you're kind of left with the best decision, which is an M&A offer.
Yeah, a lot of times it just distills out. And as the founder, what you have to think about going into that meeting is, how do I articulate plan B? Because this one doesn't work out. So what is the value that the basis for the alternative that I'm arguing concretely? What is the alternative that's going to be compelling to the VCs? Because unless it's very real and very concrete, they're going to go for what's on the table.
Agreed.
Yep.
I have a number of items that you should be doing, like patents and hygiene. What are the things you should not be doing? For example, we have some IP and we're considering putting it out as open source. There's some business value, but we don't know how bad this is. Is this, it's going to mess it up? So, any similar things we shouldn't do at all.
I'm going to fall out of my chair. I'm glad you hit on open source, because open source has a lot of great aspects to it. It really gets you through the development process very quickly, and it's very attractive in that way. So acquirers are very concerned about open source to the extent that it might infect the rest of your software or your product line. So essentially, with open source, there's different kinds of open source. Some of it is not that big of a deal, nobody cares about it. There's GPL or LGPL code, which has this lovely little effect of when you link it to your own code, you have to open source the whole thing. So now what you have is a product you spend a lot of money on that anybody can get access to. It's hard to make a valuation proposition for that. The harder part is that your acquirer is going to be resistant in including that into their own solutions. So for open source, I think the don't is just don't be willy-nilly about it. The do is to have a thoughtful process. Doesn't mean you can't use it, you just need to think it through. In the diligence process, there are companies that will, Black Duck and Palamita, that specifically will assess your entire code base and see, did somebody not follow your policies, and is there something in there? And the acquirer will analyze it, and sometimes you can fix it by taking it out, and sometimes you can't. So don't do that. There are other don'ts, but it looks like someone else has a question.
Sure, Tessa, thanks so much. It's okay if you can carry on other don'ts. I'm quite willing to hear more don'ts. But I was curious about several aspects and flavors, but I'll try to keep it brief here. Which is to say, both Nirav and Kapil talked about their acquisitions being at a good price and so forth. I've always been curious about the post-acquisition value payoff for an acquiring company. You got acquired for X, the sellers are happy. Is the buyer really happy, and how much time is he going to take to recoup his investment, as seen from a personal experience point of view? Both from Christian, Tessa, yourself.
What did we get for this thing?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
What
I mean, this is what we got. So let's talk about integration, because that's really, obviously looking ahead to the post-closing environment, and can we deploy the technology worldwide in our global enterprise? Where are the employees going? How can we use them? How can we leverage them? You guys are living through this now, or have lived through it, ups and downs. Maybe you can share your views first.
So when we were acquired by BlackBerry, they had a team doing their app store, about 50 guys. And they didn't tell us this, but those guys, when we were first acquired, that press release was news to them. So they weren't very fond.
Meet your new...
They went, the first meeting with that team wasn't very fun. It wasn't fun for 6 months. It led to several of them basically quitting, right? Because this was done over their head. But since then, most of the Armenian team is still at RIM. They still want us to be around, so and we asked our senior management, do you still want us around? Is this a good value? Stick around. And it's deployed, which is what they want us for.
Integration.
Well, so the payoff they were looking for was they were looking for feature acceleration and technology acceleration relative to Google and Apple, and they feel they'll achieve that.
I think integration is an interesting process in my view, right? So, to say the least. But there are two key aspects, right? The first aspect is the payoff that you asked for, right? In the end, the company does get a new technology, a new strategic direction, a brand new advanced technology, perhaps a new segment or a new market to go after, and that you cannot take away from. So that's fantastic. And then comes the issue of personnel integration, and that's rife with lots of issues. In our case, the acquiring CEO is a phenomenally great guy. So he was really nice and positive and very welcoming to the Silicon Blue team. And predominantly that team is still there. But there's always issues with employees, exactly like Nirav said, right? There's employees that say, hey, we've done it this way. We've always done this better than you. Why should we acquire you? Do your way. And so there's always personnel issues as you go through this, but typically it's a rewarding experience for the acquiring company because they've got themselves a new product, new technology, things that are beneficial to them.
So Tessa, again, from the integration standpoint, what should companies who are going to be sold be anticipating after the closing? Are there surprises that they ought to be thinking about as you go down your list that maybe they're not aware of?
I don't know what you're referring to, Chuck. So you asked a little bit about don'ts, and this is a similar issue. So one of the things that the company's thinking about is how is it going to deal with existing contracts that are already out there? So you've entered into an agreement and you can't terminate it. And so now the company that acquired you, which frankly has no interest in your existing agreement, is trying to move all of the engineers to its high priority project and can't do it. So from an integration perspective, it's very helpful to make yourself attractive, to have the capacity to get out of bad relationships, or frankly, good relationships that may not be good for your acquirer. From the perspective of the founders and your employees who you care about in their careers, what you don't want are kind of poison pill provisions and agreements that say, X who worked on this technology can't work for any competitor or can't do this. Because what you really don't want is to limit the professional trajectory of your employees. So those are two things that we see come up a lot. Those are in the sort of don't and do category.
So there's a school of thought that actually says that the reality is most acquisitions don't work out. The synergies aren't realized and buyers overpay and they don't capture the value and the businesses are mismanaged and they don't continue to incent in the way that was designed. So, Christian, I mean, is that true?
We're done once we sell. Affect our fee, deals done.
We're out of there.
I have no idea.
Success.
I think people measure success by a lot of criteria. It's very complicated. One is, did the buyer overpay? And if we as bankers on the sell side do our job, then we hope every deal fails because we want the buyers to overpay and have great success for our clients. But in all seriousness, boards often consider price and terms, it's kind of certainty of close of the deal, and price as their number 1 and 2 criteria. And fit is often lost. And that may be most important to the team, most important to the founders, but as a board, their job is done with bankers, right? They sell the company, tender their shares, they resign as board members, and they're done. And then it's insurance covering their liability going forward. And so the fit component is absolutely critical. It's one of the many reasons why when you do get an approach, you do want to contact other buyers, you want to evaluate, is this marriage something that's really a good fit for the companies? Because while there's the deal, and the deal's important, there's a lot of employees who are going to have careers at this new employer, and this is absolutely critical. So the CEOs that we work with that are focused on employees, have a big voice at the boards, and focus on the transaction as a holistic consideration, not just the pure headline price. And we've done a lot of deals where CEOs choose a lower price, and the board chooses a lower price to go with a better fit, higher certain transaction.
So founders, knowing what you know now, are there any things, again, in particular that you would do differently perhaps going into the next exit that you have to maximize the fit and maximize the post-closing success?
Yeah, I mean, if I was doing this again, I'd spend more time on, okay, who am I going to be working with? Does the other team know we're coming? And just the culture, like going from a small company to a large one is day and night. There are like bullies on every corner, right? IT will bully you, security guys will bully you, and lawyers say, hey, you want a deal? Are you crazy? Get in line. It's the line is 6 months long just because your deal got done. And there are all kinds of people who are jealous, right? Because they've been working at this company, and you're this.
What am I? Yeah, chopped liver. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things to watch for, and so if you keep your ego at home, and try to be very humble coming into a new company, and basically try to meld in, then things go smoother.
Let me just repeat what he said basically, right? So first thing is, I think the company does get a return because they get their technology and stuff. I think the employee stuff is tricky, simply because the cultures are different. And you need to focus on making sure the employees meld with the culture well, because it's going to be a cultural transition. And in most cases, the acquiring company, even the janitor there thinks, we bought you. So you have to be very careful about that. Right? And then the last thing you want to do as
Gotta take care of that guy.
and the last thing is, you want to protect yourself and some of the key employees to make sure you don't sign any non-competes and things like that limit your ability to find other careers in the future. And that's what I would do.
I forgot to mention that one thing. There's a big title shrinkage that happens for your employees. Yeah, all your guys who are VPs and directors, they go down to managers and senior managers, and that's really hard for them, right? It's as big a hit to their ego as getting a lot of money, and counseling people through that is tough.
Yes.
I was wondering about, because we have good representation from Crossborder, your China experience, of course, Christian, Plaza, lots of different countries are also going to acquire U.S. companies or vice versa. And of course, within the country itself in China, Chinese companies getting acquired by Chinese acquirers. So I'm looking for the regional aspect of transactions, if there is some experience you can share as far as how valuations take about that side of things. And also, Kristen mentioned so many statistics. One of the other statistics I was looking at flavor from you was to say, sometimes there are two other types of transactions that happen, which is people invest ahead of the game with the hope of acquiring sometime in the future. So how many of these transactions take place where some investment by a corporate entity takes place and then an acquisition happens in the future? What are the valuations of the private transactions versus the public transactions in terms of where the needle moves in terms of valuations? Just those kind of flavors I'm looking for.
Okay, so I can take the first part in terms of cross-border, and you can hit the second part. So cross-border, I think there are a couple of keys. One is you got to know the local rules, and the local rules will dictate how you structure, where you structure, and how long it takes. And you got to understand that, because it's somewhat of an irony, but in a company like China, which massive liberalization has taken place, unprecedented, and yet it's probably still the most highly managed environment in the world in terms of the regulatory. And it's the regulatory that's going to drive how fast you're going to be able to get a deal done. So for example, if you have significant revenues generated by two companies that are merging or being acquired, even if they're offshore, but China's a big part of the business, you may have an anti-monopoly notification in China, and we're unfortunately in an environment where that's, it's sort of increasing regulation, whether in Europe or in some of these key economies. The other thing I would say is that the culture fit just is magnified, and so I think for the typical, quote-unquote, typical Silicon Valley type technology company, great technology, you want to be in that market, one critical issue is who's going to be the champion that owns the success of the execution of that business plan over there? Do they speak Mandarin? Do they understand Mandarin? Have they been in that market? Do they know what the heck is going on? So that they're going to commit their professional future to delivering the value that your board is being told about for this opportunity. So if you're investing or you're looking to buy, you really have to go in there with eyes wide open. The third thing I would say is know your partner. Because in most cases for a growth company, organically, whether for time to market or other reasons, you're not going to be able to go it alone. In a market like China especially, or Japan, or some of these other environments. And so you're going to have to partner. And things like the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, follow U.S. citizens or residents, U.S. companies wherever they go worldwide. So you have to do some targeted diligence to understand we have government customers, we have government officials, how are they making their accounting for their expenses and stuff like that. And then on the flip side, when you're dealing with a foreign buyer, everybody, a lot of people are talking about China outbound, or, I think Japan now is really matured, and they are very much, I think the clients we work with, they're just like a Cisco or an Intel. They got a game plan, they do this all day, every year, and they got 60 people, they're there in the meeting room, they're executing. Chinese companies, literally, they're still gathering information, many of them, large companies. And I have represented, large consumer brand company looking at the GE white goods business. The chairman's comment at the end of his diligence process, how do we manage this company? Is it our way, their way, or a third way? I'm not sure. So you got to sort that out. I think we have time for one more from the floor. Yes, right here.
So my question is that I think, I'm sorry, in the Valley or the startup statistics, about 10% of the companies succeed and 90% of startups fail. So most of the success of 10% means either the exit happened like an M&A or a stock IPO. What happens, is there a merger and acquisition term, the fact that 90% startups fail, that means nobody bought them, or no merger happened, or there's an asset, somebody bought the asset, something. Startups kind of fail means there's no M&A happen on the other 90% of the category.
Right, there's no liquidity event. There may be a sale, but maybe it's a distressed sale out of bankruptcy where the technology is just being bought or certain assets are being bought, yeah.
So is there a process for that? Is it like, are you guys involved in that in general, or is it
Yeah, I mean, if it's a distressed situation, there's actually fantastic opportunities if you're the buyer to get that out. There can be a court process. You can do a prepackaged bid using bankruptcy laws to achieve that. But for the board, I mean, that's a much different kind of a dialogue when you're at that point where, people are just running for the exit. So I'm not sure if it, is it as high as 10%? I'm not sure it's as high as 10%.
Yeah, I don't think I have to.
Hi, Chuck.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes, one last question. Okay.
Thank you very much. Actually, I come to these events quite often, but this is the only chance I'm actually going to be able to practice some Mandarin with you, so I'm very excited about that. So my question for the panel is, how do you determine a good banker with the great one? So what do you do that's differentiate with someone else?
So 1, 2. There you go, right here.
You're not going to like my answer. So a great banker doesn't ask for upfront fees.
I agree with that.
Basically, he believes that. So we did a beauty contest for bankers. We had companies of all different shapes and sizes, and we basically asked them, okay, do you believe that you can sell this company? And they all said, yeah, we believe, but we want it upfront. We said, no, you don't really believe. And we got the guy who really believed, and he delivered.
I agree. So every one of these is really custom in my view. We talked to several bankers too. They're really big bankers that are just, for them it's just a commodity, one more company. And so in the case of Page Mill, I hate to say this, I'm gonna make it good for you. The Page Mill guys came across, they fit our needs very effectively. They're more boutique, they knew our business well. They came across clearly understanding semiconductors extremely well. They knew who the other buyers potentially were. They broadened that very effectively. And the team we got, which is his colleagues, ended up being very good in negotiating skills and understanding our markets well, which we thought was a perfect fit for us. So it really depends on where your strengths are and where you see the fit for these bankers.
Yes. So, it's a great question. I think people have a hard time hiring bankers because you don't have a chance to hire bankers very often. So it tends to be, well, what do you think? And so people tend to choose solely on have they done a deal with my buyer? Have they done a deal with my micro segment? And I think the way we think about it is the way you choose a banker is there good chemistry with the person? Ultimately, you're entrusting them to be in the forefront of negotiations, having direct dialogues that you have no data on exactly what transpires. And so if you don't have a trust relationship with that individual, they're not high integrity, then it's going to be broken. The other component is, are they competent, do they do deals in our space? And I think those are the table stakes ultimately about how you should choose a banker and ultimately get a good banker for your firm. What distinguishes a good banker from a great banker is a banker who has high integrity, who's focused on the entire transaction process. They don't stop at the term sheet, they don't stop until there's money in your bank account all the way through. And there's different roles for the banker throughout the transaction, and there's parts, kind of post-term sheet where legal counsel takes over and drives the majority of the process. In most technology deals, if the banker disengages at that stage, then you lose all the context for the business points that get done between the LOI and the closed deal. In many cases, our view as our firm is that the deal is half done at the term sheet. You have a signed deal, you have a handshake, you're agreed, you're halfway there. There's a lot more work. The deal will die 3 times between the term sheet and the close, and a great banker is engaged all the way through the close.
So we'd very much like to thank Vish and Naveen and Shalish and all of you for your attendance tonight, notwithstanding the presidential candidates. And we hope it was useful for you. And we look forward to future great events and future great companies through the Thai entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Very good. Let's give them a round of applause. Thanks so much all for coming. Thank you all the panel members for a wonderful insight into this topic. Just a quick question as you all get up. How many of you downloaded a mobile app for this evening's event? I hope you're going to use it. We really need your feedback. It's a test, it's a pilot, and we want to try to improve your network opportunity at Thai events. And this is the way to go. In advance, you will see who all are coming, who you want to network with, and be able to share photos and so on. So once again, give us your feedback. Thank you very much.